Greetings and welcome to the Thought Leadership segment on Top in Business. As we continue, of course, with this show, we progress on matters to do with healthcare. And a company that has been very active in Kenya is Philips. And today we're honored and glad to be joined by none other than the CEO for Philips Africa. That's Jasper Westerink, who's in the country for a lot more details and he's going to tell us why. Jasper, thank you so much for speaking with us. Quite sportish of you as a CEO. Where are you running to?
Well, basically, you know, we're a health technology company, but we also strongly believe in prevention. And part of prevention is creating awareness. And actually, just before I came here, we kicked off the Tour de Meru, a cycling from Nairobi to Meru to create awareness about cardiac arrest. So I come from that, and this is not my normal attire.
Oh, that's great. And of course, just trying to put up the idea of a healthy nation and why really health is so critical. Right here in Kenya right now, healthcare access is actually one of the big four priority agendas for the president. As Philips, are you plugging in this in any way, of course, representing the private sector?
Yes, we are actually part of one of the platforms that is specifically created to foster collaboration between government, private sectors and other partners to drive, in this case, primary care, and that's about access. And of course, we interact with the government on many levels. We just finished a number of ICUs, so we're very much working together with the government to drive healthcare to the next level.
How does Kenya compare, and maybe perhaps the East African region, compared to African countries in terms of healthcare access?
I think all African countries have different challenges, but what I really appreciate about coming to Kenya is that I get the strong feeling, the strong sense that everybody wants to really make a significant step forward. And it seems that everybody is aligned on that. And I think that is very strong in Kenya, and I see that to a lesser extent in other countries. So I think that momentum to really make a step change is there in Kenya, which of course is something we embrace, because by working together we can make that step.
The key issue has been affordability.
Yes, affordability is of course always a challenge, especially when you want to extend to universal healthcare. And that's why it's so important that you work in partnerships where you not only look at today's value, but also the longer value, where together with government, private sectors, NGOs, you try to find the right models that support sustainable healthcare. And again, Kenya is, in my view, one of the leading countries in Africa.
Speaking of models, any one particular one maybe you can suggest for the region, especially looking at best practice that you've got it from Philips?
Well, the challenge, of course, is that if you want to drive universal care, you go to areas where people have less income. So you need to find a model where you can cover the total country in a way that is sustainable. So not only charge the amounts you would charge in the city, but you really need to look at a model how you charge in different areas. And again, that needs to be formed in a partnership together with the government.
You seem to be taking more of a county approach. Is this how Philips hopes to operate in the country in terms of, going county by county, or would you want to roll out, kind of the information sharing or kind of the sensitization through a national level or county level?
Well, what we bring, of course, is a lot of experience from around the globe. And we have experience in different models and different rollout schedules. In the interaction with the government, with the counties, we need to define what works best for Kenya. In the end, we can advise, but the choice is, of course, to the Kenyan government to make the choice how to implement, where to implement. And we will share our best practices, we will share our opinion, but together we need to make that choice.
Look at it this way, maybe you're sitting with the task force or the president in terms of advising, the stakeholders in government about how to really advance this affordability and increase access to healthcare. What would you say?
Well, I would start again with awareness, because you have a young population. I think it's very important that we start educating people on how to live a healthy life, because prevention is still better than curing. So I would focus on that area for sure. And next to that, I think if you want to cover the whole country, you have a deployment challenge, because you have a vast country, you have a financing challenge. So I would focus my areas on trying to drive a standard, maybe test and pilot at once, but then roll it out across the country. I
mean, something as simple as cycling as what you're doing, people will just take that for granted, but in your view, you feel that would actually increase sensitization, with people taking care of themselves.
Well, when jobs are changing, people used to maybe work on the farm and be physically active. Now they sit in an office and they don't exercise. So if it's walking, cycling, whatever you do, just taking your kids for a walk, I think it's important that we tell people that taking care of yourself, having physical activities really improves your life.
Let's move away from healthcare and let's talk about Philips doing business in Africa.
Sure.
If you just paint for us a picture, you sit in South Africa and you look after the continent. How has it been doing business in the continent?
Well, the continent has close to 55 countries, so it's very difficult to pinpoint out one message for the total. But you see,
maybe regional perspective, you can look at it in Sub-Saharan Africa, East Africa, and maybe West Africa.
Yeah, what you see is shifts. of course. Some countries, some regions are really coming up. So Algeria, Tunisia are markets where the healthcare market is now growing fast. Others, like Egypt, still struggle with devaluation issues. So it's really a mixed bag. And we have basically 5 offices, 5 districts in Africa, and you need to be agile. You need to be able to play where the momentum is, and that's where you need to focus. And you need to be able to make sure that you have an installed base, which we have, to actually make sure that you can continue service. Healthcare is not just selling a piece of equipment. It's bringing equipment, tools, processes, but also servicing it. And we have a huge installed base, so in that sense we cover the whole of Africa.
Something that, of course, multinationals will share with you speaking about. What are your pain points in doing business in Africa?
It would be easier if there was really one continent with one set of regulations, one set of rules. But of course, the countries are different. We see improvements. Countries are clustering and making small trading hubs. And I think the diversity makes it a great opportunity, because you can bring different services, different solutions, but it also comes with a lot of administration, and I think that could be improved.
Maybe the solution to that will be what maybe East Africa is trying to do in terms of regional integration and looking at the East African market working together.
For instance, East Africa, but if you look at Africa, many countries have the same challenges and the same opportunities, and I think by even working closer together, making it one more open market, reducing regulations, reducing processes, I think will benefit everybody.
What next for Philips in Africa?
Well, we've been here over 100 years and we want to stay here. We will continue to drive our efforts for universal healthcare. We continue our drive in primary care. And we will continue to work with governments to bring solutions, to bring hospitals, to bring processes, because we think and we are sure that this is a continent where we as a brand can make an impact. We want to impact 3 billion lives by 2025, and in that sense, Africa as a continent is very important. And we also believe that there's a long-term business to be had here.
Yes, well, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you. And next time you need to join me cycling, right?
Oh, for sure. Maybe perhaps I can loosen the tie.
We'll get you a Philips t-shirt.
I'll hold you up to that.
Good.
Jasper Westerenck is the CEO for Philips Africa, for just giving us an overview on why he's here. Of course, Tour de Meru, just cycling from Nairobi to Meru, just trying to increase access to, of course, healthcare information, and just making sure that people are aware about taking care of themselves. Well, let's leave it at that for the thought leadership segment. Coming around after the break, we're going to be looking at the stock market updates and just some of the winners and losers in the stock exchange. Stay tuned. Greetings. We continue with the show on Top in Business, and right at this point on a Market Watch segment, what we're doing is that we're actually coming into you from the trading floor of the Nairobi Securities Exchange. As you can see behind me, of course, there's a lot of activities on different counters. What you notice is that the shares marked in orange are actually those that are remaining unchanged at this very hour. The shares marked in green are the ones that are actually going upwards at this very hour and minute, of course, and the ones in red are actually going down, of course, shedding the price. So, of course, a lot of activities. Market close hasn't reached us yet, but to just get an overview or to get a feel of what is happening at the NSE, I'm happy to be joined by none other than Churchill Oduor, who's the research analyst at Genghis Capital. Just give us an overview of the activity behind me and how the week has been. Churchill, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thanks a lot, Laban.
A lot of activities on the banking space. You know, this is still on the back of the interest rate capping law, but at the same time, we've realized that the Capital Markets Authority has really come out, lashing and actually wielding its power, especially on the National Bank of Kenya directors, out of maybe fraudulent activities. What do you see in terms of the regulation around, the stock markets, especially coming in from CMA?
Well, that's quite a message coming from CMA in terms of, putting some of the measures against corporate governance, the actions from the board of directors. What you are saying in this case of NBK, it was a bit of some fraudulent reporting of the results back in 2015. This is 2018, but you're saying that, it can take a number of years, but CMA is really putting out a strong message that it will go out its way to at least to reinforce discipline in the market. We saw that even in today's newspapers there was a report, comprehensive report to the charges and also the fines that were imposed to these senior managers in the board. So it's quite an affirmative message from CMA that they're really keen to rein on discipline, mostly from the top notch of the companies that are listed on the bourse. Yeah.
Let's look at some of the counters that maybe perhaps did not perform too well from your overview, and what next for them?
Well, just to recap on even NBK, it released its full year 2017 results. It was quite, it wasn't as per. Looking at even the, its profit after tax was a bit boosted by coming from a low base, but net interest income was subdued, loan growth was subdued, deposit growth was subdued. So, the fundamentals from those NBK is quite bleak at the moment. Looking also at HF, that company posted the largest loss amongst the banking sector. It had a 84% dip in profit after tax. Net interest income also went down. Loan growth was also subdued. So and also these two stocks are trading below their price to book ratios, below the average of the sector. So it's really quite investors are really taking a keen eye on these two companies, and also it has had an impact also in their fundamentals. So it's one of those things that scrutiny is on the companies which are not doing well, and unless they can have some measures to have a positive turnaround, we'll likely see that even their share prices will be eroded due to the performance of their companies. Yeah.
Of course, Churchill, the main focus is to actually increase investments, on the NSE and have many Kenyans and especially other investors also participate. We're still not seeing a lot of local participation, especially, with investments on the counters. What do you think is ailing this?
Yeah, one of the things, what you've seen amongst locals is that they hold their stocks for a long time. Unlike the foreigners investors, looking at the whole book of it, foreign investors account for a marginal composition of the total pool of investors, but now they generate time and again, unlike the local investors who take time before they sell their holdings. So one of the things is a bit of some of the investor awareness that should be put amongst the local investors, taking up opportunities whereby they can be able to trade within short term and not just holding for their stocks for a long-term period. So investor awareness and also a bit of education, looking at the stocks that are out there. You find that some of the stocks that the locals have invested into, they're illiquid stocks, which is quite hard for them now to come off. Most of the investors, majorly they narrow their stocks into some of the four counters: the Safaricom, Equity, KCB and EABLs, which are quite liquid, so which is not the case to the retail investors. So most of the retail investors, some of them have some emotional attachment to a particular stock. So those are some of the factors that really hinder increased trading amongst local investors.
Speaking to the local investor, I'm sure they're watching the program right now, the idea will be if they have kind of, just a bit of savings, and they're looking at the counters, where would you advise them to put their money on? Of course, this is just coming in from a personal perspective with not any particular, mention. You can actually say maybe the sectors that, you'd say and actually encourage Kenyans to invest in. Definitely
most of the investors also, which we see has some of the gains, is into the telcos, the Safaricom. In as much as this is stock which is mostly buoyed by investors and also institutional investors. They really come into Safaricom en masse because it's one of the most liquid stocks. So definitely Safaricom is one of the best stocks for a common investor to look at. And also the banking stocks. Right now the prices are quite attractive, and also the sentiment around is that there could be a review or a repeal of the banking interest law. So these counters will likely see a bit of some positive ride in the short term. So the banking stocks also offer some of the some attractive peaks within the sector. Looking also at energy stocks, KenGen, there are some attractive buys. And also amongst the insurance companies, they're quite Kenya Re, looking at Kenya Re, Liberty, also offer some of the attractive options that investors can be able to look at.
Great. Your stock picks for next week, Churchill, before I let you go. Well, top of mind, of course, what you actually see that will make headlines and really what analysts such as yourselves will be following.
For next week, it's quite hard to pinpoint which sectors people will be able to drive the market. Yeah, but what I can say is the banking definitely is something that even the local institutional investors are looking at. Telco, of course, is one of the stocks which has really been buoyed. As at yesterday's session, it touched a high of 32.75. So it's something that is really touching new highs each and every time. So those are two sectors I'm putting my money on in the course of the coming week.
All right. Thank you very much, Churchill. Thank you so much for speaking with us. Thanks for your time. Well, that's it for Market Watch, coming to you from the trading floor of the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Just before we go, here's some of the events you should expect for next week. That's all we had for you on our premiere episode of Top in Business. Remember, this is a joint initiative project by NTV and the Business Daily. You can keep in touch with us through the social media platforms on your screen. My name is Laban Cliff Onserio, and on behalf of everyone that put this show together, I want to wish you a good week ahead and see you again same time next week.